Hi, how you doing? Although I wasn't planning on it today, I suddenly find myself with enough produce from the garden to be able to go ahead and make a batch of salsa. A few years ago, I found a recipe online that I really like. I made a few tweaks, for our own flavor, and I thought I'd go ahead and get a batch done today. It's a rather small batch of salsa. It's not huge. And so I got everything already here, and I thought, well, why not share it with everyone? It is a really good salsa recipe. I really do like it. My name is Sharon, and I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask kitchen. So here's what I've got going on. The recipe I'm going to use is from Ball Canning, and it makes about 6 pint jars. That's 16-ounce jars, or 12 half-pint jars, and that's 8-ounce jars. So I will share the recipe down in the video description, and I will also put in the changes that I make just for our taste. The recipe calls for 10 cups of chopped, cored, and peeled tomatoes, about 25 medium. I'm not sure that I have quite enough here. I'm hoping I do. 10 cups. I think it should equal close to that. 5 cups of chopped seeded green bell peppers. I'm going to use red. I prefer the red. 5 cups of chopped onions. And that's actually how I started on this today, because I had a few, 2, 4, 6, 8. I had 10 onions that I pulled today because these 10 onions had sent up seed heads. So they're not going to be good for storage. And, they're just best used. So anyways, that's how I started on this. I have tomatoes that are ripe. I pulled the onion. I have a bunch of ripe peppers. As a matter of fact, these bigger ones I was holding in the fridge already so that they wouldn't, go soft or get too old. It also calls for 1 1/4 cups of cider vinegar, at least 5% acidity. I didn't have, I only had maybe a half a cup of cider vinegar left. I didn't want to go to the store, so I just finished off the rest of the measurement with white vinegar, which I checked, and it is 5% acidity. 3 cloves of garlic. My garlic has kind of large cloves, so I'm using 2. A tablespoon of salt, and I'm using coarse salt that is not iodized, and a teaspoon of hot pepper sauce, which is optional. I think I'm going to put in some Valentina, just because we really like that. And the recipe calls for the hot part. It calls for 2 1/2 cups of chopped seeded chili peppers, such as hot banana, Hungarian wax, serrano, or jalapeno. The last time I made this, instead of putting in the hot peppers, and I do have hot peppers, but instead of putting in the hot peppers, I put in a cup of my hot pepper paste, and I happen to have about that much left, maybe a little bit more, that I made a couple of years ago, and it's been frozen since. And I should just go ahead and use it up. The last batch of salsa was not really hot. That's certainly a matter of taste, how hot you like your salsa. I don't like it to be really hot. The other thing that I changed on this is that I added 3/4 of a cup of sugar. That is not in the recipe, but we like our salsa to have a little bit of sweetness in it. And so the first note that I have here is to actually broil the tomato halves to remove the skin. And I don't know if you've seen this before, but I used to have a little short on it. Just, you cut the tomatoes in half, you put them under the broiler, and within a few minutes, the skin blisters, and then you just let it cool for a minute, and then you are able to just pick it off. And I know that you can, put the tomatoes in boiling water and then in cold water, and then the skin slips off. Broiling the tomatoes does pretty much the same thing. I don't know if one is less mess than the other, but I kind of like this method of broiling. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is cut the tomatoes in half. I'm going to take out any cores, any blossom ends like this, or the stem ends, cut those out, and then I'm just going to put them under the broiler. And to make things even easier, I line the pan with tin foil so that it'll be an easy cleanup. So I don't know if it's 10 cups, but I have just the right amount of tomatoes to go on this baking sheet. And I have the oven set to broil, and I'm just going to put them under the broiler, and I'm not going to step away. I'm going to watch them because it doesn't take very long for that to happen, and you don't want that to burn. So there's how they look when they come out of the oven, and I'm just going to let them cool for a minute. So while those tomatoes are cooling, I'm just going to go ahead and start on the peppers. And so the recipe says they should be chopped and seeded. And of course that's simple enough. My favorite way to do that is just cutting off the 4 sides, or 3 sides I guess, and then I go in like that and toss the core. So a couple of years ago I bought one of these contraptions, which is a vegetable chopper, I guess, and then the chopped bits just go inside there. It has a very, very sharp blade. And so it also came with another insert, another blade that is finer yet. But I think this is going to be just fine. I'm pretty sure that I probably used it the last time. And this is exceptionally good for chopping onions, I have to say. So it is noisy, and you kind of have to slam it down. It's also, I think, better to put the tougher part to the blade side, so in this case the skin side to the bottom. But if you just try to press slowly, if you just try to press it down slowly, it's very difficult. It's better to do it with a big slap, and then it's easier that way. And so that's about the size that it comes out as. I'd say that's about 1/2 inch, I suppose. And you know, I've also done this in the past with the food processor as well. You don't get as even pieces if you pulse it on a chopping. It works that way too, but you do not get as even of pieces. It says 5 cups. This is a 4-cup measure, but right to the top I think would be about 5 cups. So I'm just going to keep on making noise here. Okay, I think that's going to be about 5 cups. And I'm going to go ahead and get those tomatoes now. And here you can see how that skin just pretty much slips off. So there might be some places where the skin didn't quite blister or didn't quite get hot enough, but it's going to be very minimal. And yeah, I really find this to be an easy way to skin tomatoes. And I'm going to chop those tomatoes in this chopper as well. Okay, that was messy. I think the last time I made this, I used only Juliet tomatoes, and they're a small grape type of tomato. So all I did was halve them and broil them and take the skins off, and then there was no need to chop because of course they're small kind of bite-sized pieces to begin with. But I did land up with chunks. I don't have 10 cups of chopped tomatoes. I have about 8 cups. I think that'll be fine. It maybe will just be a little bit thicker salsa, which will be fine by me. And so all of these ingredients are just going into my stock pot, and we're going to cook it up in a little bit. Okay, I'm ready to cook. So in here I have, well, the recipe calls for 10 cups. I don't have that much. I think probably 8 cups of chopped tomatoes and 5 cups of chopped pepper. That's about what I have in there, and mine are red peppers. 5 cups of chopped onion, and I think I probably have more like 6 cups of chopped onion, but I think that'll be fine. 1.25 cups of vinegar, a tablespoon of coarse salt, and 3/4 cup of sugar. The recipe also calls for, if you like it, it calls for cilantro, 2 tablespoons of finely chopped cilantro. I just left it out. And so I have this now on medium-high heat, and I'm just going to let it come to a boil, and then I'm going to let it simmer for probably about 15 minutes. Oh, I forgot the garlic. I minced it. with one of these contraptions. And so all of that garlic is just down in there. Zester, that's what that's called. I tend to use it more for garlic than I do for zest. And the other thing I'm putting in is my red pepper paste. Now it calls for a cup, and I'm just thinking maybe I should measure these. I feel like one of these might be a 1/4 cup. I almost think that I would have measured it when I put it in there. It's really, this red pepper paste, you know, it's really just made with some olive oil, hot peppers, salt, and I think some garlic. You cook it for a bit, and then I just froze it. You could keep it in a jar in your fridge for a while as well, but I just don't go through it that often. So I think that I have some red peppers. I have, I think, probably about a dozen hot peppers. And I will probably go ahead and do another batch of this and freeze it. So I think that's going to be about a cup. If it were thawed, I think that would be about a cup. So that's what I'm going to add. And I still have 2 packages left over. Finally, I'm going to put in a few shakes of this Valentina. We used to bring this back from Mexico whenever we visited Mexico. And I was actually getting really low on it. I was almost done the old bottle. And I was really happy to have found it just recently at Superstore. That one is a measurement with love. I don't know, maybe a tablespoon or 2. And it's not really hot. It just really is more of a flavor. And now, while this is cooking and then cooks down a little bit, I guess, I'm going to go ahead and get the jars ready. And so here's what I use for canning is a steam canner instead of a big water bath canner. I bought this a couple years ago as well. It does work well. I think it takes a little bit longer probably than a water bath, because it does take a little bit longer for it actually to come up to temperature. There's a gauge on the lid, and once the steam inside reaches the temperature that it shows on the gauge, at that point you start counting your minutes. So it's not from the time that you actually put the hot jars into the steam canner. It is when it gets to temperature. So that part takes longer. But I have a glass top stove, and so I'm a bit hesitant to use a big water bath canner. And in the past, when I did some small bits of canning, I really don't like to can. So, you know, that's why I don't have like a ton of supplies or great big canners or anything, because I just don't like to can. But anyways, in the stock pot, that's what I've used before for a water bath. You're really limited to the height of the jars and also the amount of jars that will go in. So this steam canner just takes a little bit of water in the pan, and so it'll take 8 of these jars, which is I think the amount that I'm going to be canning today. But first of all, the jars have to be sterilized, and so I like to pour boiling water over inside and over all my jars just prior to using them, just prior to filling them. Okay, the salsa is the thickness that I want, although I did have to drain off about 2 cups of liquid. It was pretty watery. I don't like it that watery, so I just used a ladle to take off some of that liquid. And I've moved the steam canner over to the heat to start heating up the water. First of all, this is aluminum. The whole thing is aluminum, so it's not very heavy. The bottom part is the vessel to hold the water. And this is just the part to keep the jars off of the water. And then the lid goes on, and there's a steam escape right there. So that faces away from you, and at the same time I'm able to read the gauge at the top. It's not upside down. And now sterilized jars, however you choose to do them. Some people like to simmer them. Some people like to put them in the oven. I like to pour boiling water over mine and just transfer them hot. So you want hot jars and hot product to put inside the jar. And a funnel makes things really easy, as does a good ladle. And then it's just a matter of ladling it into the hot jars and putting on the lids. turned out to be exactly 6. Ouch, dummy. Just going to wipe off the lids to make sure that there's nothing there that will prevent a good seal. And those lids just get screwed on just fingertip tight. This batch actually turned out pretty hot. I had a taste. It's tasty, but it's pretty hot. And so I think maybe I should have only used 2 packages of my hot pepper paste instead of 3. So if I make another batch, I have 2 packages left, and that'll be, you know, about perfect for that. So we're just waiting for the steam canner to boil, which it has just started. And so it's still on high. So I'm gonna set it down to about medium. It's not supposed to do this. It's supposed to just have enough steam in there to, you know, so that it escapes at the back, but it doesn't spit all over the place. And that's kind of what it's doing at the moment. But it'll calm down as soon as I take this lid off. And I'm just gonna stack these jars just around. I don't know if you can see that. Here is the gauge, and at the moment it is showing that it is almost up to temperature, but you know, it's starting to drop, of course, because it's no longer on the heat. And now it should start going back up in a second, and I just have to wait for it to get to the very top maximum amount, I guess, of steam and heat that's in there. And once it gets to the very top, then I'll start timing it for 15 minutes, and that's actually the jar processing time. And I need that temperature gauge to go all the way down to V before I start the timer at 15 minutes. And this has now gotten to the temperature it needs to, and so I've started the timer. And that's it. So that's 15 minutes. And that's all there is to it. All that's left now is the cleanup. It looks good. And thanks for hanging out with me in my kitchen today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, maybe tell your friends, maybe a hype, and if you have not yet subscribed, love for you to do that too. I hope you're doing well. See you soon.